for a dream to die. Rely on yourself in no way. Believe.
Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday. One more day until the weekend. Um, it is 0 degrees here this morning. You're supposed to make your present petitions known, and I forgot to submit that I don't do this level of cold. I don't know if he would have listened anyway, but I probably should have made a petition that okay, you know what, zero is a little bit low. I don't have enough meat on me to handle zero. You're gonna have to do a little bit, but zero it is, and it is bitter. I would never, ever, 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 ever find myself living anywhere that had this as a regular. Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. Not no no wow no. Okay, so if anybody's out there that's at 0 degrees, I empathize with you. I really do. I really do. This morning we have a journey. It's been a while since we've had one. This ought to be really, really good. Louis McIlwain is his name. He has his own YouTube channel. Pretty good from the few videos I've seen. He's intent on getting God across to people, and that's very vital. So he'll be here this morning to share his story and his journey with us today. So please, if you wouldn't mind, give your undivided attention to Louis, or Mac as he goes by, as he shares his stories. If you please welcome Mac to the program. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm frigid, but I have a. This is how bad it is, right? Because where I'm at in my basement, there is no heat down in the basement. Okay, and the basement has two windows that are, and they're the well windows, So everything, I'm pretty much in an ice box. So I'm sitting here with a space heater at my feet for my hands. If you see me constantly doing this, it's because I'm putting my hands down to get it warm again. So don't think I'm trying to escape the camera. I'm just trying to stay alive in my basement with my 0 degrees. So welcome to the program, sir. It's good to have you on. I will give you some time on the screen by yourself for about a minute and a half, somewhere like that, and just to give a breakdown of you and your story. And when you're done, I'll pop back in and we'll get going. Sound like a plan?
Excellent.
All right.
It sounds like a plan.
There you go. It's all yours.
Yeah. So the first thing that I can say, Marlon, is that I have the opposite thing here. I'm sitting here in Guatemala, where I've had to cut down my air condition so that you wouldn't hear the buzz in the background. So while you're struggling with the frigid, I'm struggling with the heat. With that said, it has been an amazing Christian journey for me. It started back in 1962 as the only child to some wonderful parents. So I want off the bat for everyone to understand my parents were excellent, but yet I struggled with a lot of things as an only child, and in doing so, dealt with issues of lack of self-confidence, and definitely lacking in being comfortable in social settings. That all culminated at the age of 19, where I left my father and mother's house, and similar to the prodigal son in Luke, went out to do riotous living. And that riotous living for me actually lasted for about 10 years, from about 19 to 29, just out there doing everything with the wrong kind of people, just trying to build up self-esteem, trying to build up confidence, and not having a direction. I did not have Christ in my life at that point, and so I gravitated to any pagan beliefs that were out there. and succumbed to many concepts that were not healthy for me, many relationships that were not healthy for me. And at the age of 29, it all culminated in being broke, busted, disgusted, in a first marriage that was crumbling, and ending up in bankruptcy court. And I was sitting there in the court as my whole life was being presented before me as a deadbeat, as a failure as a man. And I knew at that point that something had to change and enter in the Lord Jesus Christ, because I had a moment where I finally got alone with him, the first time I ever considered him. And I literally, guys, I looked up into the sky because I didn't know how to do anything differently. And I just said, you know what, God, if you are real, make me a better man. And I wish that I could tell you that, like in the movies, like all of a sudden you could hear the harps and the violins and the oboes break out. But nothing changed. uh, I was still going through life, still doing things, drinking, and also into sexual promiscuity. But slowly but surely, I realized that God had done something inward because my heart had changed. And so, just to wrap this part up, that was the moment that I realized that God had kept his promise. He made me a better man and has continued over the years to make me a better man day after day after day. And if I want to just leave you all with this, it all culminates in understanding that we must be crucified with Christ. And that is not just something that we read in the Bible, that is a heavy statement. But once we can die to self, then and only then do we truly live. That is my testimony.
Amen. So let's start at the beginning. You mentioned that your parents were um, great parents. Um, what one trait do you think you took from your father?
The best trait that I got from my father was to actually be a free thinker. Since you're wearing that cap, so let me share this, Marlon. What my father would do, he was a very unique man for his generation, because he actually allowed and promoted debate. So we would debate about everything: sports, politics, everything that you could imagine. His only requirement was that he said, boy, if you're going to bring something to the table, you better be able to back it up. That's my dad.
That's a good mantra to have.
Yeah.
We say that a lot on Too Strong, and very little people come on there with anything to back up anything. They come with a
Yes.
lot of gusto until they run into a brick wall, and then they
Absolutely.
realize they don't have the engine power to go through it. So, um, your mother, what type of relationship did you have with her compared to your father? Was it more of a nurturing role as the traditional way, or was it more of a disciplinary um, role that she played?
Well, actually, in the early years, there was definitely a strain between my mother and I. And I don't mean like a hatred, but she was too nurturing. And I wanted to have a liberty. In fact, my whole life is based around wanting to be liberated in some way or another. And I always felt bound in her house. And it was actually um, a disagreement that I had with my mother that eventually forced me, as far as my thinking, to leave home. And that's because I decided to stay out one night and party, didn't return home until 10 a.m. the next morning without a call.
Whew.
And yeah, I know. In retrospect, if any of my children had done that to me, there would have been a lot of issues. But at that time, I was really flexing my muscles, and I realized, Marlon, that that was my father and mother's house, and that there were rules that had to be adhered to. I just wasn't willing to adhere to them, and that's why I left.
Gotcha. Someone asked, what is gusto? Fervor. Lots of zeal. They come in here,
Yes,
guns ablazing. They just think they're going to destroy the whole conversation with their viewpoint. That's gusto. Um, just
yes.
to, for clarification, uh, just they just think, wow, Superman strength coming in, and then kryptonite. That's that's the problem with gusto. It can be a detriment if you're not careful. Um, so you grew up doing pretty much what most kids do, which is enter that stage of rebellion. Um, and some do it out of this of spite to the parents, and some do it out of a need to, like you say, be liberated. Not realizing what they're really doing is putting themselves into further bondage. Um, at what stage did you strike out and try to attain that liberation? Aside from 19, I mean, that you said that you that's was the age that you really
Yeah,
started moving out. But
that
at what point did you actually
actually
do the true rebellion? What stage was that?
that was probably right at the age of 12, between 12 and 13,
Hmm.
where I started to buck the system. I did one of the worst things that one could ever do was I told a lie to my father. And my father is an old school kind of guy. And I don't know, Marlon, if you remember back in the day, they used to have these old fashioned irons with the super thick cords, electrical cords on them. Well, I knew that I had overstepped my boundaries when my dad ripped that cord out from the iron and proceeded to whip my tail.
Huh? Huh? Huh?
That was the last time that my father had to inflict any pain on me.
I never got hit with that cord, um, but he had leather all over the place. He was a shoemaker, right? So he had true leather and rubber. And mom would be the one normally that gives the beating. She was the one that was in charge of that. But if it ever had to get back to him, you went way too far. If he had to get involved,
Way too
yeah, I know that feeling completely. Um, when you finally got that request made to God to ask him if he's real, to do what he got to do, did you foresee him answering, or did you ask that facetiously?
I had a hope, but remember, I was really coming to him at that point as just another option. He was just one of many options that I had taken over a 10-year period, and I just hadn't tried him. So look at it as playing the slots. I just pulled down the lever, hoping to hit the number.
Yeah. And did you so you had no
So
real grandiose thoughts of him showing up in some sort of dream or angelic vision or something like that? It was more of a, I'll toss it out there, see if it sticks, and if it does, yay. If it don't, oh well, next option.
absolutely, because I had no understanding of God, none.
Hmm. Um, did he answer that request?
Like I said, he actually did answer. I just hadn't realized he answered until I realized that probably the two worst demons that I had at that point, let me make it three demons actually. But the first one was definitely the abuse of alcohol. The second was sexual promiscuity, and a lot of that was through masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
And the third, whether and I didn't even understand it at that point, but I do understand it now, was actually self-hatred.
Yeah. Did you ever get to the point of suicide or the
I thought
contemplation of
about
it?
it. I thought about it, but I never got to the point where it was actually something serious.
Hmm.
I think it's because I was too selfish to even want to take my own life.
Huh. I could see that. I could see that. I got to at that point once, and then the rest of it, I said, well, even if I'm selfish, I'll be selfish and be done with it. I've gotten to that point. Um,
Okay.
I do want to, for people who might have need clarification in the audience here, because I know this will come up later at some point by somebody. The kinds of discipline that Mac is talking about, to me anyway, is not abuse. Here's why I don't consider it abuse. When I was growing up, there was very clear cut rules that they made sure to tell you off the cuff. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you do that, that is going to happen. And they usually told you, I will whoop your behind if you ever did dot, 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 dot. So when you went out like an idiot and did dot, 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 and then you got what they said you would get, that to me is not abuse. That is follow through. That is teaching me how to be a person of your word. When I say I was gonna whoop you behind, I'm gonna whoop you behind. What that did for me the next time is like he was legit. They weren't playing. They said they would do it, and they did it. So I probably shouldn't cross that line no more. And so I didn't. See, that's the key right there. It's like
Yes.
touching a hot stove. If you touch, I got burned. The burn is not abusive. The burn is what is built into the fire. Okay, good. So you know what you don't do next time?
Yes.
You don't touch the fire because you don't want to get burned. So if you consider it abusive, Latifa, then don't do it to your kids. It's a simple fix. I'm talking about for me. I did say for me, for me, for me. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. You know why I didn't? I'll tell you exactly why I didn't. I realized something about my parents when they actually did stuff like that. They cared. Because I had friends who didn't care. Their parents did not. They went out, did all kinds of crap, would tell them that give them a punishment and never did. You know what happened to those friends? Prison time, dropped out of school, lost their education. They became nothing. I saw the difference between them and my parents. When my mom and dad said something, it was set in stone and he didn't do it because it was always accompanied by love. Okay,
Yes.
always. So I cannot consider that abuse, and I will never consider that abuse. Some may, because you might have been abused, but hey, that's not everybody. And no, I didn't go out and do anything sneaky, because you learn pretty quick that the reason they're doing it is to keep you safe because you watch around your friends. Anyway, I had to clarify it because you see, it's a good thing I started to clarify that because there were people in the audience that did think weird. So anyway, like I said, something else you mentioned that kind of jumped out at me in your discovering of God. When you asked that request and he finally kind of answered, you said that something deep down had changed. Can you identify what that was? What exactly that came to your frontal awareness that happened deep down? What was that?
I most definitely can. And actually, as I answer that, even to your audience, I believe that you have to get to that place before you can actually experience Christ in the fullness of who he is. For me, it all goes back to self-hatred, selfishness. And it was a hard lesson to learn because in First Corinthians 13, there's a passage there that talks about us looking into a mirror dark. Eventually, the mirror starts to lighten up and lighten up and lighten up until you are face to face with your creator. And for me, I wanted, like most people, to blame everyone else for my problems. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about anyone else
But you.
but me.
Yep. Yep.
That's the answer. That's the answer.
When you got that reckoning, what was your step? What did you decide to do?
Uh, it made me go to the scriptures more in depth. And amazingly, God started to put people in my life who weren't going through the normal, what I call churchisms and things and forms of religion, but they were actually talking to me about what I like to call the God that's beyond the ink on the Bible,
You're right.
the space between each word. And I started to experience God on that level. And that from year to year to year to year began uh, to this other life, this beautiful life that one could have if we would get out of the prism or the matrix that we have made Christianity and religion.
Now, it's odd that you segue like that. And I think part of this is not just for you. This whole live here is not just for you to share your story. I think there's someone else in here that has to hear this as well. Um, so the same person says, "Are you serious? I get to each his own, but most times kids are angry afterwards, and it causes rebellion into adulthood too. And they call that, there is a term for it. It's called selfishness. Every child will be angry that they got called out on their selfishness. I have a 7-year-old. I have a 7-year-old. If I tell him no, he gets angry. Do you think I care? No. Why? Because I know better than he does. And I do not care if you're mad, sir. The answer is no. And at this point, you have two options. Either drop the attitude with me or relegate yourself to your room and do not leave again. You only have two options at this point, because I have to teach him what selfishness does to you. Selfishness alienates you from people. Selfishness causes you to be isolated. You know what gets into his head eventually? That's not a very good behavior for me to have. It's not like I cuss him out and throw him into the room, but he knows what stern is. He understands it now, and it's not abuse, even if I do have to swat him. Here's the thing, and I'm sure that Mac will have more to add to this too, because we both grew up under the same type of system. You screw around, you find out. Selfishness causes anger. And just because a kid is angry does not mean I have to kowtow or submit to the fact that they're angry and placate. That's how poor parenting is done. And that's how you do end up with spoiled children and an adulthood that stays spoiled. That momentary anger might be there when they're an adult. But you know what eventually sets in? Maturity. And they do go back and look back and listen and think, man, but I did screw up. I did do what they told me not to do. So how unwarranted was my beating? A child who does not have that will always look back and be angry at the parent. In fact, they'll be more angry at the parent for not disciplining them than they will be for disciplining them. Yes, to each his own. You can do what you want with your children. Completely fine by me. I don't care, because I'm not raising them and I don't have to deal with them in the real world. I can avoid them. But for me, when I look back at my life, and I look back at and I can tell you every single beating I got, not one wasn't warranted, because I was warned about every one before it happened. What say you? Mr. Mac, what say you? Is he frozen and gone? I think he might be gone. Mac, you there?
Yeah, it's been doing a little freezing,
Oh,
but I'm hearing everything.
say, go ahead and tell me your viewpoint about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you're giving me this opportunity, Marlon, and I do want to speak directly to Latifah as well as anybody else who feels similar. When I look back on my experience with my father, similar to what Marlon has just, the saving grace for my life, because as a grown adult who now has 5 children, I had to go through the similar things with my children. And I had an example to go back to, and just so that it's understood, my father, whether he understood it or not, was actually emulating God himself, because God disciplines those he loves. And sometimes that discipline is hard.
And it makes you angry.
Because it takes that. Yeah, it takes that in order to get the point across. I needed that. I needed it. And it made me love my father even the more. And I'll tell you this, I had a wonderful relationship with my dad up until the day he left this earth in 2015. That was my dude. That's my guy. And I needed it. I appreciated it. And the problem with this world today is that more people aren't being disciplined and instructed and guided in that like manner.
Yeah, and that's what Satan does. Satan tries to keep you from that type of discipline. You don't need it. Oh, he doesn't need that. Let him be himself. You know what happens when you're yourself? Sin. There's a reason why God said to die to self, so that you don't be selfish. No one wants to be selfish. They need to be Christ-like. There's a massive difference between the two, and they shall never meet. Ever meet. Now, you say you have 5 kids. So do I. What is the mix?
Okay, so let me explain. I'm a product of 2 different marriages. So
Me too. Okay, keep going. Let's see if we're family here. Let's find out if we're. Let's
so
find
in
out.
the
Let's
first
go.
marriage, I have 2 children. My oldest. In the first marriage, I have my oldest son, and then my daughter. Then, in the second marriage, I married into a woman who has 1 biological daughter, but then she also had 2 adopted. Let me not say has 2 adoptive children, which are Guatemalan. And when we got married, I told them that just as I treat my own children, you are now mine, and I will be your father. So I have 5.
3 stepsons here, and a boy and a girl of my own.
I knew we had made a great connection.
Oh my goodness, that is trippy. That is trippy. The only difference is my daughter's the oldest and my son's the youngest, but it's still a boy and a girl from my own loins, and the rest of them are from outside sources. But now that's a good thing, because here's what I don't know if this is the same for you. It taught me a lesson about God in a way, that he has and then he grafted others in. and it was a lesson on how to love those that may not be of the same cloth, but of the same family. Um, was that what a did you have a reckoning of any kind of trying to? For some, it may not be difficult, but I had boys that I was trying to graft in, and boys are different. I want people to understand, boys are boys are different. What kind of difficulties did you find in bringing in to your heart the children that were not yours, especially the adopted ones that were twice removed, not yours?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question because of the ones that are not my own, there are two girls and then a boy. Um, the girls they were simply easy. They flowed into it with no issues whatsoever. With the boy who happens to be the youngest of them all, and he's 24 now. Um, that was a
Hmm.
major struggle. Uh, um, and I understood it because he had been living with his mother, my wife, uh, all his life. Um, just really quick to put this into context, um, the child was literally left at her doorstep because the natural mother could not raise him. And so he came into all of this with his own issues of abandonment. And he saw my wife as the only one he could trust. So I think from his perspective, now this dynamic is coming in and it's a male dynamic.
Yeah,
He had to learn how to trust me and ultimately learn how to be obedient to me.
yeah. Did you guys succeed with that before him leaving the house? Wait for the delay.
It's part of the question because we're having a little bit of a delay.
Hmm. Did you guys manage to rectify that distance before he left the house?
Oh, absolutely. But I'll be honest with you, it took me having to remove him from our home for a season in order for
Mm.
him to get off to himself to realize that, again, like the prodigal, maybe it's actually better going back to my father's house.
Okay, so I don't know I don't know why and I don't know how, but we have almost it's pretty crazy similarities in our stories, right?
Yes.
My eldest, who is the stepson, the eldest, he was the most difficult to graft into my system. Um, and when it was this year that we finally made a connection point where we laugh again. I mean, we used to do when he was small, but not anymore. And it was always angry. I mean, everything was terse. Um, and just like you said, that season had to happen. We had a time where um, he had a massive blow up at me, and I decided to just cut communication. I went dog dead silent. He would be in the house, him and his mom would talk, but I said nothing to him for months, just nothing. I was there. He still got fed, still had a roof over his head. I did what I had to do as a father, but I said nothing to him. I decided that I was going to leave that growth to God and let God deal with that. I'm not going to touch it no more. I keep getting in the way, it seems. So I'm going to focus on the fact that I have to talk to God often and deal with God, and He will deal with him. Fast forward to a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago now. I get this long text from him because what happened in the time that I left him alone, God got time to get in there and talk to him, directly talk to him. And I mean, directly to. I have a story about him on my page that, I mean, he talked to him in a dream directly. And when that happened and God finally, like you said, something deep changed. And when he came back, it was like you could see it in his eyes that was something was different. There was not that same anger, not the same it was something in there, like it was shining out, something changed. So I fully get that when you leave things to God, who can fix everything, it works out a lot better. I bet you too that when you left him, kicked him out your home for a season, you got time to recenter yourself with God as well. There you
Absolutely,
go. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, no one wants to kick out their
No,
child.
no.
Uh, Again, this is someone I have grafted into my heart as my own. Um, but understanding again the lessons from my own father, tough love is always the best love.
Agreed. Agreed. So now you are of age and you are doing a calling that was placed on your life to minister. Um, what are the most difficult portions of this particular walk for you? I find that mine is attacks. They're constant, they're relentless. Not just, I don't mean mental for myself, external, trying to either deny what God is doing or relegate it to, or you're just wanting fame. How do you, what exactly is your walk like now doing what He's asked you to do, and what kind of obstacles are you encountering?
So to answer that, Marlon, I actually have to first start with how the walk began, because like most people, it started in the traditional sense of going to church on Sunday, going to Bible study on a weekday night, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point, I'm definitely in a mode of wanting to fit into a community and be embraced by that community. And God had blessed me with several ministerial gifts, and I wanted so desperately to share those with my house of worship. And what happened is that I got sidetracked because I didn't receive the acceptance or appreciation that I thought I was going to get as a child of God. And that forced me out of the local church mentality. That's what I'll call it. Um, where it all culminated in me literally being called out by the pastor of a particular church in the midst of a service, a conversation that had been personal between me and him was now public. And that was the driving force to actually make me leave the local church for about 5 years. Now, I did not leave God,
No, yeah.
I just left the institution. And I call it like kind of Moses's time in Midian, the way I look at it, because then I was unlearning everything that I thought I knew about God. I was trying to empty my mind of all of it and have God refill it back. And He did. And again, He put certain people in my path, as with this influx of social media, where for the first time I was starting to hear other people that didn't necessarily look like pastors or church folk that were actually saying things that I understood because they were exactly what God had shared with me. And coming out of that 5 year experience, it was like I literally set out again on a journey. And This time, that journey was different. I
Hmm.
no longer relied on the institution to direct my path. I listened to God, and God took me from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria to the uttermost parts of the earth, and I've never looked back since. That's the short of it.
Um, that's a wow part of it. Um, because here's a as you're mentioning what he did, right? Um, the crazy part of it is exactly what he does to the spirit. The same way you are confined to a building, this little hub, and their teaching really is what kept you in that hub. And that's the goal. I'm sorry to tell people the majority today, majority. And I know people are going to say, but my church, I understand that there are still a few that have the preaching of the actual gospel at their core. I get it. But the majority, unfortunately, are hell bent on keeping you in those walls. What happens, like Mac just said, when God gets a hold of you, though, he takes you from a confined room and he opens up this massive, you know, the how thousand cattle on that's the size that he takes you to. He takes you from Job with nothing to the Job after the reckoning with God, and expands. And it's not a matter of whether or not it's a blessing. I get my blessing, and I get the blessing is having him. That's the blessing. I really couldn't care if tomorrow God decided that nothing was in my future for me to have but him. That is still the blessing. The rest of it is peripheral. The rest of it is pork. The rest of it is add-ons. Everything else is add-ons. The true blessing in life is to have an expansive relationship with God, and when that happens, you exactly what you just did. You can breathe. Like it's like a it's like being in a stuffy room for years, and then you step outside, and it's spring, and there are flowers, and you have no signs of hay fever. And you take that one deep breath, and all you could see is just clear, and you felt like, what was I doing in that room? And right outside was springtime, and that is exactly what it feels like when you get that reckoning with God. It does not feel punishing, it doesn't feel oppressive, it's liberating. um, and for people that have been on the inside of religion, when they get relationship, the difference is night and day. And I bet you could ask your 24-year-old right now that if he were to look back and see what he considered a religion, which was the relationship you and him might have had, to what it is now, now he can say, no, this is relationship. What that was before was not relationship, but this is relationship. What you are teaching him and many others that you encounter is the true idea of what he says when the son, who the son sets free, is free indeed. This is what exactly, and you know firsthand what that is. Um, your wife.
Yes.
Um, how long have you guys been together now?
We in March of next year, it will be 6 years for us.
Nice, nice. We just hit 10 ourselves. Um, in your mind, do you believe that the person you are with now um, is the one that's going to do exactly what a wife should do, which is be not just a support, but that person that will help you see God more? Has that been the case?
Absolutely. And if I can qualify my answer, um, we literally never had a date before we got married. I met her on the mission field. One of the reasons why I'm sitting in this place now in Guatemala is because I was supporting her in her ministry. And literally in a 10-day trip, I knew I had found my wife. With that said, there's an age difference between us. In this case, the opposite of what most people think. She's actually 14 years my senior,
Mm-hmm.
and she's lived some things. Again, she has also come from not so glorious first marriage. So I believe from her perspective, me coming in being confident in my beliefs as a Christian was refreshing to her. And what I would like to tell the women who are listening now is that if a man is following God, hard, she will never ever have to worry about being in submission to him because
Mm.
he is already in submission to God,
To
and he will
God.
never do anything outside of God to hurt her, discourage her, or and yes, to your question, it has been the breath of life to have this woman walking beside me. She understands who I am. She knows that I'm on a different trajectory than most of the people that she's ever encountered. And she willfully and willingly has come under to follow my journey as we both follow Christ.
And that is the key, I think, to everything. Um, and this applies not just to marriage, but to God. Um, the submission to God is not, it's not in what you're giving up, it's in what you're gaining. I think a lot of people think if I give in to God or I submit to God, what I can't do anymore and what I can't get anymore, you're looking at it wrong. You're looking at it completely wrong. That's because you don't know who you're getting. And if you don't invest in finding out who you're getting, you're never going to think it's enough, which is why relationship is so vital with following God, because you have to know Him. And when you realize who He is, following, cake. Following is like, why didn't I do this sooner? Following is like second nature, the exact same way in marriage. When the husband follows God, the wife will have an easier time. Now, I'm not saying she will do it right off the top. Why? Because everybody has their own journey to make with their relationship with God. Some people don't want to do it. I understand that. But the excuse will not lie in what the husband's not doing. The excuse will be, I still don't want to do it. But when your husband is following God, submission will be easy because the same heart that God possesses, the man will have because he's following God. And you will be able to see that heart, and that heart will be displayed to you, and you will have zero, I mean, zero problems. Because what we end up doing is we take our concepts of domination and apply that to subserviency. It's not the same. The wife isn't following the husband because he's dominant. The wife is following the husband because the husband is following God. that is that right there is the key that marriages miss, that the church misses. They should be following the pastor, if you want to put it like that, because the pastor is following God, not because the pastor tells you to follow him. And if the pastor is
Yes,
following God, he will tell
yes.
you right at the top, don't follow me, follow God. That's the difference. Um, your channel, I want to make sure I get people to the can you give me the name? Because I did have it there. Is it I have a couple of videos
Yeah,
on it. I wanted the history of it. I need to find it. What's the name of your channel?
yeah, it's called Adoration Talk Radio.
There it is. Got it. All right. So I'm going to take that, copy that channel. I'm going to put it in the chat, guys. Beginning. It's still very small, but we want to get that moving. So here we go. I'll put
Amen.
the channel in the chat here. Um, if you guys wouldn't mind going over and um, giving Mac a follow there. I have one last question to ask you. With your history of life and living and marriage and children. If you had, like you're getting now, a few minutes to tell people um, what you consider the most vital lesson you've learned, what would that be?
Well, you know what, Marlon, that is the perfect way to end this segment. I hope I have a moment to be a little expansive in my
Yes, yes,
answer.
feel free. Yeah.
Okay. Because you're actually a part of it, what I'm getting ready to say. So, to your audience, I am also a very, very fervent viewer of Too Strong with you and Corey. Several months ago, you guys were doing a program that was about basically the demonic presence in heavy metal music.
Hmm.
And I am actually a musician, and I'm always curious in people's takes on what that actually means as far as the influence that it has on society. And so I wasn't watching live, I was watching late at night, about 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, actually. And that particular program went through a switch in atmosphere that I wasn't ready for because a woman came on. I won't mention her by name, but she came on and she demonstrated some of the same selfish thoughts that I used to have. And a lot of those centered on trying to make God within her prism of understanding. And she, at first, just simply refused and refused to hear you in particular, Marlon, because you were trying to tell her about herself, but she wasn't hearing it until it finally seemed to click. And this woman ended up crying like a baby. And here I am on the other side of the screen, and I was crying as well because what you told her was that she has to come up out of what she thinks God is and actually hear who God is from the source, Him. And at the core of that message, and this has been kind of my marching verse of scripture ever since, can be found in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17, where it says, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. That which is old has passed away, and behold, all
Things
things
are
are
become new.
new." And what I realized and why I was crying along with her was that I was still walking around thinking that everything was okay, yet I was still like Lot's wife. I wanted to look back on my past. I wanted to reflect on the negativity, on the old man, still wanting to revel in the old wine and trying to put this old wine into new wineskins. And I realized in that moment that I was just as guilty as she was. And it was in that moment that things turned around in a direction that has culminated in having an experience like what we're doing right now today and other things that have all of a sudden materialized. And I'm not trying to make this about anything that is being gifted to me. It's that I changed and I realized that when Jesus said that it is finished,
It is
it is
finished.
so deep, Marlon. it was finished. It was finished for those before him, those in the midst of him, and for
And those
anything
after.
that comes after him. It's truly finished, and we can actually live in righteousness, in holiness, and in the perfection of God. And when God looks upon us, he looks upon us through the blood of Jesus Christ, and we don't have to wallowing in guilt and shame and anger and all these things that would so easily beset us, but we can actually be free in him and to be able to share that message with the world. And if I could end it anyway, this is the way I would end it, is that, as you've already said, there is liberty in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Unfortunately, most folk are still walking in darkness, and they don't even realize it. That's what I would end with.
Amen. I can't add anything to that. I hope people listening, and again, people listen. This is about the relationship, and the relationship is where the freedom is found. The freedom isn't found in act. The freedom isn't found in what you do, what you bring, what you offer. The freedom is in the relationship. Once you get that, you get it all. You get it all. Thank you for reaching out, Mac. I think we need to have a joint session again that's outside of the journey about an actual topic. I think that'd be a great thing.
I would love it.
If you guys, again, I'm going to put that link one more time in the chat for people to go find the channel. Go give them a follow, give a listen. The channel is called Adoration Talk Radio on YouTube. Feel free to go by and sub up to Mac's channel. Again, thank you for being on. This was amazing. This was really, really good to have. I wish you nothing but Godspeed, literal Godspeed on this journey that you have. And that means every bit of blessing that he could offer you, I wish for you. And that's mostly because I want his presence more to be around you than anything else.
Amen.
Thank you for being on here. And thank you, people in the audience, for tuning in. This was an amazing journey. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to have it. We will be back on tonight on Too Strong, talking about the Meghan Markle situation. And then tomorrow on Straight Talk, we'll be discussing whether or not Christianity has been the biggest curse to mankind. Someone said it in a chat one time, and it gave me a pause. And so we're gonna break that down, going into the history of everything. So make sure you tune into that tomorrow morning at 9. Please. And again, thank you, Mac, and tell your wife blessings.
I certainly will.
Remember, people, wisdom calls to you from the street. So please, please, please find wisdom. Peace.
Hold tight the dreams, for if dreams die,